welcome to the July the 27th, 1987 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, as we bring back memories of Grand Prairie of the past and bring us up to date with some very, very exciting tidbits about a couple of real special families here in Grand Prairie, Texas. And this is our history tape number 47, and we're delighted to welcome Spencer and Weta Lewis of Grand Prairie, Texas. Weta, it's so nice to have you, a long-time resident of Grand Prairie, on the show finally.
Well, thank you, thank you. I never see you, so it's just taken me a long time to get here.
That's it, that's it. Spencer Lewis, as a very exciting young man into the community, many areas, and we want to find out about that today. We're going to begin with you, and would you look out into your camera and tell us about the genealogy of the real Spencer Lewis, your mother and father, and your mother's maiden name, the area from which they migrated when they came to Texas, if they did, and just a whole thing about Spencer.
Well, Grand Prairie is my adopted home. I'm very enthusiastic about Grand Prairie. As a matter of fact, we haven't lived here as long as I would have liked, but I've lived in Texas all my life. That is, most of my younger life. I was born in Houston, Texas. Lived in the piney woods of East Texas when I was growing up, around Woodville, Texas. And that's in the Livingston area, around the Alabama-Coshawta Indian Reservation. And so I have a lot of Texas lore in my background. Coming to Texas, my families were, on either side, were preachers that had come in from various areas. My great-grandfather Meredith came from the Pennsylvania area. He was an Episcopal minister and one of the earliest ministers in the Episcopal Church, a small memorial church in Calvert, Texas. My father was born there. And
in Calvert?
Calvert, Texas.
All right, go ahead.
And that's Robertson County.
Okay.
Near A&M.
All right, I knew you'd remember that. And you would give us your father's full name.
Father's name was J. Barber Lewis.
Okay.
He was born in Calvert and raised there, and when he was a very young man, taking his early schooling, he went to Waco, Texas, and met my mother there. And my mother was, her father was, my grandfather, was a Baptist minister. And they had come from the area of Dealstadt, Missouri, and came to Texas. And he was doing mission work, and he died very young. He was probably died in Louisiana due to a plague that they had there at about that time. And he, the girls were born in Missouri, but grew up in Waco, Texas. And my father met my mother at Goldstein McGill's Mercantile in Waco, Texas. And Waco, of course, is in one of the older towns in Texas, being named for the Waco Indians. And you know Waco,
yes.
Of course. Yeah. It's a town with two tall buildings surrounded by Baptists.
That's it. That's the way.
Home of Baylor University.
And you haven't given your mother's full name, including the maiden name yet.
My mother's name was Gladys Rutha Gist. That's very nearly your name.
Yes, it is.
And they were, the Gists were an old Missouri family. They originally came down through Virginia and Kentucky and in through there. In fact, one of my relatives on that side of the family is a half-Indian called Sequoia, who wrote the Cherokee language and taught the Cherokees, educated the Cherokees in the speaking and written language. And so I have some older relatives on both sides.
All right. Now, Spencer, I'd like for you to tell us a little, you told us where your mother and father met in Waco. Now tell us a little bit after they married and about the family that came along, including you.
Well, the family moved real soon after that to Houston, Texas, where my father was employed by the Rice Hotel. And we were, let's see, my oldest brother was born in Waco.
And what is his name?
His name was Jack John Meredith Lewis.
John Meredith,
He's
okay.
passed away.
All right.
And then my next older brother was James Barry Lewis. He's passed away.
Okay.
And then I have a younger sister, Mary Elizabeth Lewis Koenig, who is still living. They live in the valley where they have some trailer facilities down there. A trailer camp, I guess you'd call it.
Wonderful.
Where the people from the east come as snowbirds and become winter Texans, and from then they become bona fide Texans. They just stay on and on and on. So
All
we
right.
get a lot of people into this area.
All right, now you've gotten here and you've left us with you and your sister, but now these Spencer Lewis, as you were growing up in Houston and these other places, Spencer, would you tell us a little bit about the places where you graduated from high school and your educational career after that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I was raised, as I said, in the piney woods of East Texas, and went to the elementary school there, and then moved to Houston when I was about 12 years old, and went to the Alexander Hamilton Junior High School in Houston, and from there to John H. Reagan High School, the old Houston Heights. That was in the early days when the Houston Heights still considered itself as a separate city, but acknowledged Houston as being our neighbor to the west a little bit there. But I stayed there only for about 10 years. Stayed there. I graduated from high school, went to the Houston Business College, and went to work and worked for about 5 years with a public buildings equipment company, and we did church pews, furniture of all types, school furniture, supplies. Then after about 5 years, I went into the Army, was inducted into the Army with the Texas National Guard. I went in with the 56th Cavalry Brigade, and our troop, our local troop in Houston, was the headquarters service troop of the 124th Cavalry. We were a sister unit of the 112th Cavalry that's in this area. And we went first to El Paso to sort of get our remounts and get situated on all of our upcoming supplies. We were using mostly World War I equipment, and everything was left over from World War I. So we had to get everything new. Then to Brownsville, Texas, at Old Fort Brown. It's not there anymore. It's a motel now, and a university that operates on what was the old fort itself, inside the walls of the fort. And then from there went to Louisiana Maneuvers, and from the Louisiana Maneuvers back to Brownsville, from Brownsville to Denver, Colorado, and I left the Horse Cavalry and went into military intelligence. And from military intelligence, I went to the Intelligence Division in San Antonio. From San Antonio, we moved to Dallas, Texas in 1942, and from there I went to an officer candidate school in Belvoir, Virginia, and from Belvoir, Virginia to Ayers, Massachusetts, to the various forts on the East Coast, and over to England for the invasion of Normandy. That just sort of a thumbnail sketch of the whole thing. I met Weta in Dallas, Texas, after I came back from the war in Europe, and I had again joined the Counterintelligence Corps and was stationed in Dallas, and we met on the 18th floor of the old Santa Fe building in downtown Dallas. And we only stayed in Dallas a very short time and then moved back to San Antonio. And we were together there and married in 1947. So since 1947, I've called Grand Prairie my home, but didn't live here until 1957.
Yes, because there was a 10-year trek in there. Can you hurriedly tell us what happened in those 10 years?
Well, that's very, very difficult there. I went from Fort Hood in Killeen to the West Coast, and went over to Japan, and then to Okinawa. And we prepared for the use of Okinawa as a base for airplanes to fly out to Korea. Came back in 1950, was in California in the Mojave Desert, helped develop the sonic sled, which taught the astronauts the 19 Gs that they needed for their takeoffs and stops. Then from there to England, where we built the Greenham Common Air Force Base. And that's where the F-111s are stationed now. You see it on television quite often with ladies lying around the perimeter trying to stop the people coming in and out. And then from there back to where? Virginia, I guess. And from there to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. From Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri to Korea. And after the Korean War, went down to Japan, where we stayed for 3.5 years, and then back to Grand Prairie. So we got to live in our place in Grand Prairie in about 1957. We had built a house in Grand Prairie in 1952, and we didn't get to stay in it until 1957.
That's wonderful. We're glad to have you back home, Spencer Lewis. But now, Ouida, we've sort of always had, because her family has been here. Ouida, start out and give us your genealogy, and we want you to talk about your mother and father and do a show and tell for us.
My mother was Letha Vestal Chapman, and she came from North Texas, from Cook County. And my grandmother, who lived in Grand Prairie with us a lot, she was a widow lady, was a Skaggs. They still live in Whitewright, still have part of the original farm.
Is that your mother's mother?
My mother's mother.
All right.
And they both the families came from England, probably for religious reasons, because they came in the late 16s, and they were Baptist and Quakers. So you have a pretty good idea.
That was a good combination.
That was a good combination. It gave problems sometimes. But the Vestals came from North Carolina, and my grandfather came out with a cousin because one of his uncles had come out. And he met my grandmother, and they married in Whitewright, and then bought a farm in Cook County. And the Skaggs part, though, came out in about 1850, somewhere along there, and he was a wagon master. And he was bringing a wagon train on their way to California, so it was actually in the 40s, 1840s. And the story is that they had a falling out. And so he and a lot of the people on the wagon train stopped near Whitewright and bought land and set up farms there. And since they were all from Kentucky, the community was called Kentucky Town. And it's still known as Kentucky Town. And that's why. So actually, we've all been in this area for a long, long time. I have one sister who lives in Grand Prairie, Maddie Parker. And I have two brothers. My oldest brother is C.M. Chapman, and he is in Florida. He lives in Jacksonville, Florida. And my youngest brother is James, and he lives in Houston. And let's see, we all went to Grand Prairie to school, and our children, we have 3 children. Jay, named for his grandfather. His 2 grandfathers. My daddy was William Burton Chapman. His grandmother was named Burton. And my daddy's family came from Mississippi, and they all came together. They didn't come with the Peters colony or anything. They just all came as a family unit. And they settled around Paris, near Bonham, between Bonham and Paris. And some of the Burtons still live there, but he was an orphan. His parents died when he was in whatever it was that killed so many people then, and his 2 brothers and his father and his mother all died. So he was raised by an uncle in Oklahoma.
And what was the uncle's name? Do you know that?
Yes. His name was Fears. I just called him Papa. But his name was Madison. Madison. And they lived in a little town. Well, they lived in Caney. That's where my mother and daddy lived when they were first married. Then they moved to Texas because all my mother's family lived right around Cook County. When Camp House came in, though, the uncles, all their land was taken into Camp House, so they moved. But we moved into Grand Prairie in 1934, and my daddy was a very clever man with his hands. He'd had a garage, and he was a blacksmith, and he was a blacksmith in the service. in the First World War. And
right.
some of my mother's treasures are handkerchiefs that he sent her from Paris, silk handkerchiefs from Paris, and postcards from Paris. Not Paris, Texas, but,
But Paris,
Paris, France. And let's see, but he was a horseshoer. That's what he did. And when he came here, he worked for American Body, and then he was a contractor. He built houses. A lot of his houses are still here that we see around. And we lived at 514 South Center. We lived in Grandma Crabbensmith's old townhome. They had a house out in the country too. So they lived in the country, and we bought their house in town.
That's wonderful.
And the house is still there.
Yes, and your mother, you just lost this last year.
And she was a real character, a very strong person.
Do you happen to have a picture of your mother and father?
I have a picture of my mother and father here. Now, this is when they were first married, and I didn't bring one. I don't know if you can see that or not, but
let's hold this up right here so that maybe the camera can pick that up without a glare. That's a non-glare.
It's non-glare glass.
All right, and we at least want to show the one of your mother with her little dress on, and then the dress that goes with it. Would you try that?
This is my mother. I suppose she must have been about maybe 2 or 3 years old. I'm not just sure. She couldn't have been any more than that when you see the size of the dress. But this is the dress that she was wearing in that picture.
Isn't that magnificent? That is
this is hand done.
Oh, that is.
And it's full length. You see, it comes down over their little feet.
Oh, yeah.
I had her baby dress, but it's just too fragile. It just falls all apart every time you. This is all cotton.
Oh, it is. All right, you also have a picture of your mother when she was a young lady.
This is my mother and her 2 oldest sisters. This is my mother right here, and she didn't look unlike that all of her life. She was a very pretty lady.
She really
I thought
was.
Very striking, with a lot of. And this is her sister. They look exactly alike now, but she was blonde with blue eyes, but they had the same zip about them.
All right, now there's an excitement of this box. Tell us about this
Now,
little memorabilia box that you have.
Well,
waiting.
this is, oddly enough, this is a postcard. This picture is a postcard. And it's to their aunt. They sent it to their aunt. And she was not married. She was their maiden aunt. And it was Miss Frankie Skaggs. And she was, now they were all clever with their hands, but she was an artist. And she made this box. And it's all, it's burned. I don't know how she did it. I have another one that's in pieces. But you can tell on the edge, you know, but it's just perfectly done. And ever since I can remember, I don't know when she gave it to my mother kept her treasures in this.
Oh, wonderful.
And these are her treasures.
Those are some of the handkerchiefs.
These are the handkerchiefs
from Paris. Oh, isn't that
See?
exciting?
Isn't that something? This is my favorite. It's not, see, it has her name on it.
Yes.
And then this is a pretty one too. These are silk, so they're really, I really should do something to seal them.
Yes.
Because see, they're fading.
They're
and
getting very fragile, aren't they? They should be in a shadow box, you know.
Or something, yes.
Yes,
So
they should.
nothing rubs on them. I'm going to have to do that. Now, my favorite things are not what you would call treasures, priceless treasures, but I inherited all of the sewing paraphernalia.
All right.
Because they also, you know, my mother was a great tatter. Now, she was the best one of all the sisters.
For tatting.
For tatting.
All right.
Everybody had a specialty in this family.
All right.
And this is a piece. This one has never been used, but this was done for a yoke. I don't know if you can.
Beautiful tatting.
It is absolutely gorgeous. I have some huge pieces that she did for scarves and things.
All right.
And let's see what else. Oh, she and they did lace. I gave you some of her tatting with pillowcases on them.
Yes.
For the. Well, now this is my grandmother's. My grandmother was just an artist.
She really was, wasn't
And
she?
these are things that you set into pillowcases. And these I've had and they've worn out. So I take them out and save them.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, now you've told us about your mother and father, and now we want a little bit about Ouida.
Oh, you want to know something? What do you want
I want to know, you've told us all of your brothers and sisters, but let's start with you now and talk a little bit about you. And you mentioned Grand Prairie High School. And
I did. I went to Grand Prairie High School.
Tell me about the class you graduated from, some of your favorite teachers.
I graduated in the class of 41.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, this is my class. A lot of my friends are missing from here, and to save my soul, I don't know why they're not in here. But I know they graduated. Mildred Jackson's not on here, and I know she graduated with me. Your sister's on here. I bet you can't recognize her.
No, I hardly recognize my sister Doris.
And this is Hazel Wood, and she's still living. She lives in Brownwood. And she was our class sponsor. She and her husband, this is Dale, and excellent teachers. Just excellent teachers.
Wonderful.
She was also the principal of Grand Prairie High School. A lot of people don't know that they had a lady principal. But they had a lady principal for about 10 years, and it was Hazel Wood.
Hazel Wood.
And she absolutely controlled the class somehow. I don't know how.
That is wonderful. Tell me a little bit more about, I noticed that you have a very special photograph
I do.
that we may get Spencer to help us.
Yes. Now, William Bean gave me this. The Beans and us are real close families.
All right.
We've through the years, and so when he found out I was coming on, he gave me this one. This is a 1929 picture of the Grand Prairie Independent School District, and this is the whole school. And this is this building. I went to school in this building too. Everyone did that went to school. It was red brick, and it's up in the area on College and 2nd?
Northeast,
Northeast,
second.
sort of. It would be just west of the administration building. The administration building was the old auditorium.
This is the first I've ever seen, and this is the class of the school in 1929.
That's right. That's the entire school.
The entire
This is the
school
whole thing.
district.
Now, one person you might know, a lot of people might know, is this is Miss Sadie Miller, and she taught everybody in the first grade that went to school from, I don't know, I think she taught 50 years. I really do think she taught 50 years. She and her sister, Miss Ruth Miller, were maiden ladies, and they lived on the southwest part of Grand Prairie, and they took in boarders, and Miss Sadie taught the first grade, and Miss Ruth sold insurance.
That was wonderful.
And they were kin to Dewey. I think they were his aunts.
I see.
I think they were Dewey's aunts.
All right.
And
After you got out of high school and this class,
did
what
I
happened
do?
to you then?
Well, the war was on,
All right.
and I went to work for the 8th Service Command in Dallas, and believe it or not, my expertise is budget and finance. And so I worked for them until I was working for them in San Antonio still when I got married. And then Spencer left almost immediately, and I came to Grand Prairie and stayed with, I had Jay then. And then we went to Okinawa, and I worked for the Signal Corps there. It was the same thing in office management. Then I came back and was home again because we were getting ready to go to England. I had another baby, 1 year old. So then we went to England, and I enjoyed that. And then we we came back and went all the places Spencer said, and then lived a long time in Japan. I worked again in Japan for the same people I had worked for when I was a single girl. They were finishing up their careers, and they asked me to come and work in the budget and finance again, so I did. And we had a grand time. I've had a good time traveling. I really have, and we still travel. We travel all the time.
All right. Now, what brought about the retirement? Are you retired yet? I know that Spencer is, but now what are you doing?
Well, I'm sort of I'm in forced retirement. You know, my mother got sick last year, and it required a lot of care, and we really didn't know how long she would take. So we moved her into our house, and we took care of her until she died. So I really I worked for a doctor at the time. I worked for a doctor about 7 years in office management, and I really don't know. I just haven't come up with anything exciting to do except travel.
Wonderful. And you've just returned from a trip, right, Spencer? Would you like to put in a few words about the trip?
Well, we just came back from a trip of Middle Europe, I'd say. We were in Germany, Austria, Liechtenstein, and to Switzerland. And we went first just for cruises on the Rhine in Germany, and for just seeing some of the old sites that I had remembered from 45 years back. And then when we got to Switzerland, we joined the Baptist conference that was going on in Grindelwald. which is high in the Swiss Alps in the Jungfrau area. And the Jungfrau area is one of the places, one of the most beautiful places, has 5 glaciers. They're still there. And I was happy to learn that Jungfrau doesn't mean young wife, as I thought it does, but it means the Virgin Mary. And so we had a very wonderful conference there and got to visit the Church of Zwingli, who started all of the Protestant movement amongst all the churches, and was the first Anabaptist, which is sort of an ancestor of the Baptist Church.
All right, now Spencer, I'm going to interrupt that because I want you to tell your civic involvement here in Grand Prairie, Texas. I know you're big into the Lions. You have been everything in Sesquicentennial and other things. Please tell that for us, would you?
Well, I'm mostly active in Lions work now. Of course, the Sesquicentennial has ended, and that was a very happy time. We did some things that I really did enjoy during that time, especially the community meeting of all the churches. That was the most wonderful thing. I was the chairman of the church activities committee. Now I'm the district executive council president for the 2X1 Lions district. That takes in 5 counties and about 77 Lions clubs, and the presidents and secretaries meet and go over their problems and try to decide on things to do and whatnot. I'm also the acting secretary of the Grand Prairie Evening Lions Club and put out their bulletin for them.
That's wonderful.
Other than that, my church work, which keeps me busy, as an associate teacher for the male adult club, which is consists of men from about 80 on up, and I enjoy that very much, my church work.
And you didn't tell us the church.
First Baptist Church at Grand Prairie.
I thought maybe you would tell us. All right, Ouida, we're going to let you have the last minute and a half to tell us about your involvement in activities here in Grand Prairie. And I know one that you're in.
Well,
so.
I'm in the garden club.
Grand Prairie Garden Club.
Grand Prairie Garden Club for a long, long time, and we're looking for members. And I also teach in First Baptist Church Adult 5, and I quilt. That's what I'm most interested in.
All right, tell us a little bit about the quilts.
This quilt is one that I inherited, and it was done about 1850, and it is gorgeous. If you can't, and then I have a piece of one that was done at the last about the end of the 18th century. It's about I'd say 200 something years old, and it's it's done on. It's hand-dyed and beautifully done.
Well, I know you have a box of different kinds of things here, but our time has run out, so you can just show these.
I'll just show these
as I close the show, and thank you all very much for being with us. It's been exciting to have this part of the history of Grand Prairie, and this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.